Thank you for your comments. My name is Larry Herrera, and I'm the city clerk for the city of Long Beach, and it was nice to come across the river today to visit you here. But my question had to do with a couple of things. Has there been any work or any analysis done to determine whether or not there are any risk of federal voting rights violations with respect to instant runoff voting? And then secondly, would you see any advantage to, let's say, putting a charter amendment on in 2009, or if you're in Long Beach, 2010, calling for instant runoff voting, but holding it off until a future election? I'm wondering if that makes it, allows elected officials in the community to adapt to change, lets the systems catch up. I'm curious as to what your comments are on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, courts have actually examined IRV in the past, and no court has ever found that, or rather, I'll phrase it positively, IRV has been found to comply with the Voting Rights Act. No challenge has ever held up when it comes to IRV. The second question had to do with implementation. Now, that takes a little bit of time, as you can know, because you have to train people, you have to reconfigure machines, and that typically takes 1 to 2 years. In our proposal for instant runoff voting for Los Angeles, we propose that you have an election, this be put on the ballot for November '09, but it not be implemented until 2011, in time for the city elections there, because you need to get it right. That's very important.
See, the reason I think that it is timely now in the state of California is because we're in the process of redoing our machines. Most counties in the state of California have had innumerable problems with their machines and with their system. And there's a lot of talk, and of course there's a lot of complaints about the amount of money it would take. But it has to be done. So it is particularly timely today for Los Angeles, a city as large as Los Angeles, because you're talking about future elections, and we're probably in the process of going out and trying to buy some of these machines, new machines that are out in the market. So I think that the issue that was raised, would there be a problem in doing it in one election and implementing it in another? I think it's probably the only orderly way of doing it, because I think it'd be the worst thing would be ordering it in the election and having it implemented a year later too. It takes several years in order to get it implemented correctly, and having the right software and tools for you to put it forth.
Thanks, Richard. Just wanted to add something on voting equipment. According to the LA City Clerk's report, Secretary of State Deborah Bowen will certify the city's voting equipment only until up to May 2009. Beyond that, the certification will not be allowed. So the city is going to have to buy new voting equipment, regardless of what happens with IRV. Now, that equipment is going to cost over $30 million. Now, the catch is that IRV can help pay for that equipment. That would be especially helpful in a time that the city's facing a $406 million and counting deficit. So basically, in roughly 4 election cycles, IRV could pay off the costs for that new equipment.
Good afternoon, Eric Sanjurjo with Councilmember Huizar. A couple questions for you. You mentioned that new voting equipment will be purchased. One of the ideas that the clerk put forward in their report was to do a vote by mail system like they do in Oregon. So I'm just curious how compatible IRV is with vote by mail. And specifically, I appreciate that folks were not too happy with Mr. Smith's letter, although a couple of the points he does raise I think are interesting, such as the cost of manually having to figure out the IRV system, such as if you had a mail-in system. So what cities have that, and do we know if it slows down election results, because that's been a problem in Los Angeles in the past? Just curious, and I have some other questions I can ask later.
Could you just talk about your second question a little more? So are you talking about...
It's one question, really. What cities have a IRV system where it's by mail, and how does that slow down the elections, if at all? Do they have special equipment? How does that tie into this discussion for buying new equipment? How would we handle it, I guess, is the question.
Okay, so the first question is, what do we think about vote by mail? We think that idea has promise, but the devil's in the details. In other words, you have to make sure that if you're just going to do vote by mail where people can't come in person to vote, that you go out into all the communities and make this convenient for them. You have to have access. So for example, in that city clerk's report, they talked about having vans go out to communities that historically have had lower turnout, or go out to malls, so that voters have a chance not only to vote by mail, but also to vote in person. That is really critical. You can't just have an Oregon-style vote by mail where it's just completely by mail, because there's some communities that don't utilize that option as much right now, and there's substantial concern on that regard. But I think, if you can do it right, vote by mail is a viable option that could save a lot of money. Do you want to add anything there?
No, I think what I'm saying, I think right now it's just as Richard said, it's an opportune time because we do have to buy equipment. I mean, if we're going to make the changes, this is the time to do it. And I think given that, any large bureaucracy is going to take a couple of years for implementation, I mean, we just have to really all work together, and I think community colleges will play an active role in really educating, people on voting and doing workshops going out in the community. But I think it's really important that we need to kind of move beyond what we have been doing, and this is a time for change, and there's going to be a lot of confusion at first, but I think it's critical that if we do it slowly, we do it right, that it can be a great system. And I think the power of this is that there's so many things lining up right now that this is the best time for us to be able to move in this endeavor.
And then to address the second part of your question, there's no jurisdiction that uses IRV right now that is 100% vote by mail.
Could I add to this question about possible delays? And I'm not a technical expert. My thought would be that if there were such an event, it might be the very first time. But my guess is that, again, once the people and poll workers and everybody is refocused, there's no reason that this particular method, if a computer is counting votes, which it will, and with a paper trail, which I understand is the new requirement, there's no reason it should take longer than, the current method.
Yeah, and so IRV is fully compatible with vote by mail because it's all about the paper ballot. That's what you need, and we have that right now. People, I'm a permanent absentee ballot voter, for example, and so they just get my ballot and they stick it into the machine. That would be no change. See, I have a question for Sylvia. Some people might look at instant runoff voting and go, oh, you're reducing the number of elections, and that's not good. More elections are better. How would you respond to that?
I don't know who would be crazy enough to say more elections are better in the first place. So, I mean, I really don't see anybody really telling me that. I think what we have been hearing over and over, and I say, I really listen to the students that I come across in our 9 colleges, and I look at the older generation, and I think which is unusual, but I think to have these 2 huge generations in agreement about something. I think everybody's in agreement. I think there is voter fatigue. I think, we have to be honest. I think we have so many things going on all the time that I think we're burning ourselves out. And so I really don't see anybody saying, give me more voting times.